I'm Michelle Sterling for Friends of Science Society. It's rodeo season all across Canada, and we got the Ponoka Stampede going on. I think it's in its 90th year. We got the Calgary Stampede. It's going to be 114 years, I think. I can tell you, my grandmother spent her honeymoon at the first Calgary Stampede. Pretty wild, hey? So, you know, I'm not a cowgirl myself, but I like wearing the flashy boots and pretending. It's always a good cosplay thing. But you know what's not a good cosplay thing? Is the fact that Canada has an opportunity to sell oil and gas to the world. There's a huge deficit right now because of the conflict in Iran, and the Strait of Hormuz is intermittently open, but the amount of oil and gas, liquefied natural gas, coming out of there is greatly reduced. So there's a huge daily deficit of oil and gas. And it's going to go on for a long time. It'll take a long time to rebuild those facilities. So we have time to build a pipeline to the west coast. And right now we're waiting on Alberta's proposal to the federal government for one. But you know, June the 9th, what happened? Civil society organizations across Canada oppose West Coast oil pipeline and tankers. Right on cue, right? So they got like, 120 people or groups that signed this. We reject new fossil fuel pipelines. There's no good route for Alberta's proposed new million-barrel-a-day bitumen pipeline. It's not in the national interest to pursue a project that pits province against province, runs roughshod over Indigenous rights, and puts local economies and coastal and marine ecosystems at risk. You know, all that's nonsense. That's the tar sands campaign talking. And we've got lots of reports on how oil tankers today are double-hulled and how the tanker incidence is very low. We've got lots of reports on how Canada's economic situation is in dire straits and how we desperately need that revenue and we need those jobs that a new pipeline would bring. But these people, who are very well funded by all kinds of philanthropies, many of which are charities, that means they're operating on your dime because they're tax subsidized charities, they're against productive work. So Robert Lyman has a new report or comments that he submitted to the federal government supporting timely decision making for major projects. And most people think, oh, we've got now a 2-year window for approval, that's great, we'll get major projects going. But he outlines here the problems, and I'm just going to read you some excerpts. So the Government of Canada recently published a discussion paper entitled Getting Major Projects Built in Canada, discussion paper on proposed legislation, regulatory and policy reforms. So the stated objective of the proposed reforms is to allow the government to make decisions on major projects within 2 years. So that sounds good, right? So he says that more efficient regulatory review of projects is badly needed. Over the past decade, the time required to complete reviews of this nature often took at least 4 years, and sometimes well over 10 years. 10 years. If you're an investor, that doesn't sound good. It sounds like, there's no promise at the end of that 10 years that you'll be approved. So maybe go to a jurisdiction where approvals are faster and the framework is more clear. So he says that while reform is needed, the proposed ones are doomed to fail. There are too many factors beyond the control of the regulatory bodies that would be conducting the reviews. Now, I bet you most Canadians don't know any of this. So I hope that you will read this report that's on our website. And he explains why here. Much of this is due to the requirements of the Impact Assessment Act. The Act specifies that a review of a project must assess 23 factors, including, notably, the anticipated changes to the environment, the health, social and economic effects of potential accidents, mitigation measures, impacts on Indigenous groups, the purpose and need for the project, and it also must assess the extent to which the effects of the proposed project may hinder or contribute to the Government of Canada's ability to meet its environmental commitments in respect of climate change. Gathering evidence and hearing testimony on all these subjects is necessarily time-consuming. Yeah, of course. So the duration of reviews has lengthened the time needed for public hearings. In the pre-2015 period in Canada, public participation in major project reviews was used as a strictly direct and adversely affected test to decide who might take part in the hearings or file a statement of concern. So, that means like if that pipeline is going to go through my yard, I'm directly affected. I would have a say. Would you in Edmonton have a say about the pipeline going through my yard? No. Would you in Vancouver have a say about the pipeline going through my yard? Me, directly affected. So, now the Impact Assessment Act explicitly provides an opportunity for any member of the public to participate in each phase of the impact assessment. This has opened the door to highly organized campaigns by environmentalists and Indigenous groups to swamp the public hearing process. So he also writes here that imposing an arbitrary deadline on the duration of the project review process flies in the face of Canadian laws that grant regulatory tribunals broad discretion to govern their hearings, as circumscribed by their statutory mandates and common law principles of procedural fairness. Regulatory bodies cannot arbitrarily refuse to consider relevant information or limit the duration of testimony in such a way as to deprive participants of their right to be heard and to respond to the evidence of opposing parties. If the regulatory body conducting the impact assessment or hearing of the case for a project were to deprive participants of their right, the federal court could quash the hearing. The main barriers to sharply reducing the time spent on impact assessments are thus the Impact Assessment Act itself and the current statutory framework governing the rules of evidence. So, the reforms proposed by the government may slightly accelerate the review and approval of so-called clean energy projects, meaning those that involve solar and wind energy, electricity storage, power transmission, carbon dioxide capture and storage, and so on, but they're unlikely, however, to hasten the review and approval of oil and gas projects. So Robert Lyman says the government should be candid in explaining this to the public. It seeks timely approvals of only those projects that support its climate policy and other environmental goals, not those that hasten the economic development and transportation of hydrocarbons. And you can be sure that all these 120 civil society organizations will be first in line to be at those hearings and to conduct lawfare. And some of these groups have hundreds, perhaps thousands of followers, boots on the ground. So those are the people who are going to be opposing jobs and a better economy for Canada. All the time they're living off your tax dollars. So I think that something has to be done about that. But I've said that for a long time. So I hope that you'll have a look at Robert's comments to the government. And I hope that you have a great rodeo season, because there's lots of troubles in the world. You can always, yee-haw your way out of it for a couple of days. So for Friends of Science Society, happy stampede wherever you're stampeding. I'm Michelle Sterling. Yee-haw!